Good evening and welcome to TDM Talk Show. We're back today after a 6-week summer break. And on top of the agenda for tonight's show is, of course, Sunday's legislative election. A record voter turnout sprang a few surprises. New Macau activist Suluso secured a seat thanks to more than 9,000 votes, becoming the youngest ever elected legislator. For Agnes Lam, the third time was a charm. The traditional Pro-Beijing camp has also secured a victory by regaining a fourth directly elected seat through the list backed by the Federation of Trade Unions. Mak Soi-kyun's Macau Guangdong Union ranked first among the 24 tickets running in the election. Among the losers are Melinda Chan, who fell short of being re-elected, and Chan Mengkam's group. To delve into the election results and look into what's in store for the upcoming legislative term, we are joined by two veteran and well-seasoned analysts. Eilo Yu, political scientist and associate professor of government and public administration at the University of Macau, and Larry So, social work lecturer and current affairs commentator. Eilo Yu, Larry So, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Good evening. Let's start by Larry. So, looking into the result, did it come as a surprise to you?
As you said just now, a little bit surprised. Not really a big surprise, but a little bit because, as expected, the so-called the pro-Beijing camps, they maintain the seats and even adding a little bit more. But then it is the surprise coming from the so-called the pan-democratic people. It seems that the community generally, predicting, or at that time they're saying that they can only get 2 to 3, but this time they got 4. And in addition, a lot of people will think that Mr. So, he won't be elected, in terms of votes. But now we look at, he got a very high vote. In terms of the kind of votes that returned to him, especially when we are looking at he shouldn't be elected, but then he did. So this is what I call a little bit surprise. And of course, the so-called the incumbents, they were kind of dropped out from because they don't have enough votes. We're talking about Ms. Chan here. It seems that he's been doing quite a lot of things, but then she wasn't elected, and this is a little bit surprising me. For incumbent, normally, unless you say you are not going to campaign, Macau, the incumbents, in a way, normally they would be re-elected instead of not getting enough votes. There's a little bit surprise here.
Professor Eilo Yu, Professor Larry So was singling out Suluso's result, getting the seat, and Melinda Chan failing to get the re-election. Out of these or other features of this election result, what would you single out?
Well, I share with Larry's talking about the pro-establishment forces, especially from the Federation of Trade Union and Gaifeng and Women's Associations, right? This time, right, their votes increased substantially, but at the same time, you see the Guiana associations as well as the whole business sectors. Okay, their votes have a little bit dropped, right? And then we have the Marina Trend defeated, and so this is a little bit surprise to me that at the very beginning I think that is a reverse, but the outcome seems to be right like this. But for the case of Marina Trend, and I think actually she's always not that secure in the elections. As well, of course, in the last elections, she is quite safe. But if you look at the result of 2009, right, she got the last 2 seats, right? And so actually she is not that secure in the election. And so this time, and her vote is not sufficiently make her to be in the legislature again.
Just adding to that, compared with 4 years ago, she received about 600 fewer votes than in 2013, and the maximum number of votes that she garnered, and even if we include since 2005 with David Chow, which is not exactly the same, but we can include in the same kind of group. She could not go beyond 8,755 votes.
Right.
Right. So the pool of votes was rather limited. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So that is, you know, so it's always at the bottom. Okay. Just you know, at the bottom that whether she can get a one or not. Right. And so at the very beginning, I think that she still have a better chance. But you know, the result is, you know, actually that is the final. That is the 1 or 2 seat is not that predictable.
Now, let's look at the what is widely considered as the pro-democracy camp and the new face in town, or is not necessarily in town, but it will be in the chamber. Yeah. We're talking about Suluso Sokaho. He managed to secure over 9,200 votes, almost 3 times what was achieved by the list led by Jason Chow 4 years ago. Why?
I think,
and how?
No, I think they are of 2 different personalities. You know, they, in terms of outspoken, it seems that they are both more or less the same outspoken. But then, if we look at Mr. So, the way that he present his point and the way that he kind of making speeches, here is more the kind of with a little bit charisma, and I would say he could be a very good politician because he know how to present himself, and he know how to present the policy. And of course, I would see that because they do have the different kinds of agenda. As to Mr. Chow, you know, formerly, he was you know, quite advocating the agenda on the so-called homosexual, that is, you know, the LGBT, not exactly the gender issue, but on the homosexual issue, you know, that kind of thinking. So this is not popular among the general public in the community. We try not to discuss that many things about, you know, gender. Maybe in the coming terms we do have when we have NSNAM within the chamber, we have some more in terms of gender issue, but then not in the past. Right. So because of the different agenda, and then right now, and with Mr. So, and with the typhoon, now he was, you know, really the kind of hardworking during that time. So he gained, you know, a lot of support from the community.
Well, Suluso was also a leading figure, and he became well known after the 2014 large-scale protests against the Perks bill, compensation bill. We witnessed back then, according to some estimates, almost 20,000 people taking to the streets. Many of them were young teenagers or young adults, students, professionals. Eilo, you've been studying youth politics, you've been following all these developments. Was this a decisive factor that helped us understand Suluso's result?
Well, I think let's compare the election result with you know, 2013 and 2017. You know, if you look at the number of votes received by Ao Sun and Antonio, not much change. Or more or less 20,000 they add together, right? That's me. But this year, right? You know, the pro-democracy camps have a increase, in votes substantially, and you can see that most of these new votes go to Suluso. That's mean what, right? It's quite clear that, you know, the new supporters in the democratic camp move to Suluso. And it's quite obvious, you know, and that's mean what I would say that, you know, what Sulu did in the past 4 years, can attract more you know, supporters, in order to bring him into the legislature. But at the same time, that is Antonio and Ao Sun, well, they did well to sustain their support.
Actually, that's an interesting point. Some people were surprised by Ao Sun's result. He was embroiled in this controversy surrounding his remarks on the role played by the People's Liberation Army in the aftermath of Typhoon Hato. Some people were speculating, well, that his seat would be at risk. But at the end of the day, Not at all. Actually,
Got more.
yeah, he got more. Actually, if we look at the result compared with 4 years ago, well, this time around, Ao Kam-son managed to get 11,380 votes vis-a-vis 8,800 4 years ago. So that's another interesting feature of this election. Larry, so?
Yes. Now, but then if you look at it, when you press very, very hard, the reaction is equally, more or less the same strength. That is to say, in the community, especially if you were in the
law of physics applied to politics.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. If you were in the pro-democratic, pro-democratic camp, and you find yourself, really, really pressing very hard, or even smearing, from the other side, saying that, all these, negative comments towards Mr. Ao. And of course, if you were in their camp, you say, well, we have to go up to support him.
And I think that is,
also the case for Suluso, for Suluso's list?
No, I think that, if you look at, the vote of Ao Kam-son and Antonio by comparing the two elections, okay, and you will find that maybe some Antonio supporters, okay, migrate to Ao Kam-son.
Because they assume that
right, and what Larry
said
that,
was
right,
secure, was safe, right?
Right, quite safe, and then we have a concern that, Ao Kam-son would be in crisis, and so some of Antonio's supporter may migrate to our candidates' list.
Talking about smear campaign, or at least what is regarded by the New Macau Association as a smear campaign, let's say, for instance, when we have that rally at the Three Lamp Square, we had a small group of senior citizens holding a protest against the ticket led by Suluso, saying that there was someone in the list who would be backing the pro-independence movement of Hong Kong, Bosco Wong. He then strongly denied and rejected those allegations. But this was also visible elsewhere in social networks, in the social media, and even in the mainland. Eilo, what happened here?
Well, it's quite sure that, I think that there are two reasons. First, they want to beckoning Suluso's camp. And second, that is, to threaten the people not to talk about independence in Macau. That is quite obvious.
No one was talking about that, right?
But, they have a concern about, whether
there would be
the progressive forces may talk about this sooner or later.
Yeah, and they equate, Mr. So with the independence, quote, they just equal them, they equate them exactly the same in that case. Make sure that he cannot win the race. That is, that is a basic tactics. As in, if you were in the pro-Beijing camp, yeah, definitely you will use this kind of techniques.
And then that is now you strongly deny. So in the future, if you talk about this, you will be discredited, right?
Exactly.
Okay. What about Coutinho, Pereira Coutinho? Well, throughout the election campaign, he was saying that this is the toughest race that he had ever participated in, and that even his seat was at risk, let alone his number two, Leung Wen-chai. Right. It's true, and it's a fact that he lost the second seat.
Exactly. Yeah.
But probably that was widely expected, right? But he managed to, but that was at least by most analysts.
He himself also expect getting two seats is actually
not easy.
But
impossible.
The fact of the matter is that he managed to get 14,000 votes, over 14,000 votes, 1,200 more than 4 years ago, under circumstances which were particularly challenging, I would say, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What's your reading of this?
That is, he had a shell that, your attack is not effective.
No, I think he got his basic support group. Yeah. Regardless to what kind of smearing, and regardless of all kind of, all this negative information about him, he got his basic and strong support group. And,
do you think, like, let's say, for instance, Song Pei-Kei's attack or her remarks during the election debate backfired in the sense that ended up harming her and benefiting him?
A little bit.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
I think, yes, Song's attack actually is a backfire, but I think I agree with Larry that actually, the supporter of Coutinho seems to be quite, soil-net, okay, rather than affected by any, negative campaign. And so, but at the same time,
mobilize the support amongst his base.
So,
right?
but at the same time, the increase is not that much that can help him to keep 2 seats. And so actually, to a certain extent, we got to say that he is not that successful by getting 2 seats this year. But for quite sure, he can maintain his support. But because
but by lowering the expectation.
But the question is the increase of number of voters, okay, in the long run, and that's mean he's still in problems that how to extend his support in order to grab more seats. That is the point.
And then, of course, we were talking about the New Macau linked, though some of them may not be anymore members of New Macau, such as Alcam San, but let's put them together.
Okay.
Plus Pereira Coutinho. And now moving on to Agnes Lam. Where does she fit in all this spectrum between pro-establishment and pro-democracy, or somewhere else?
I would put him in, I would put her in the middle of the row, first of all, and secondly, I can, if we are choosing different kind of political parties, she is somewhat in the Western type, the Liberal Party. the Liberal, in the Hong Kong Liberal Party, something like...
Or the Liberal Democrats in the United Kingdom, something like that.
I'm not a liberal, the liberal. Okay. Something like the Hong Kong, the Liberal Party in Hong Kong. They are a minority party, but then they can, if they shift one way, they change.
But would it be, but my question would be, would you consider her platform and her, Agnes Lam as a politician, as someone who is a moderate within the pro-democracy camp, or a progressive within, or liberal within the pro-establishment camp, or just between these two?
Exactly what you said, between, middle, this is, that type of the so-called, traditionally in England, this is a traditional liberal camp. They are pro the business people, they pro the establishment, but at the same time, they are kind of more...
She also supports universal suffrage to elect the chief executive and a number of...
Yes, they try to go towards the grassroots a little bit more than the business people, than the traditional group. This is liberal. Yes.
Eilo, the same question and another one on top of that, which is the number of votes that Agnes Lam secured this time around. Well, if you compare with 8 years ago and 4 years ago, she jumped from 5,200, 5,300 to 9,590. The same question, how do you explain this?
Well, I think this, if we have a very simple equation, by adding the votes she received in last elections, you get 5,200, and then by the same time, you get the support from the Macau New Chinese Youth Association, right? In last year, right? In last election, there was a group, right? 30 Alliance, right? And then actually
Innovative
they
Action,
were from the right,
led by Ko Ngon Fong.
right? They were from the Youth Association. This time, the Youth Association support her, and so she get 6,800 votes plus Paul Poon. Paul Poon have 22,000 last year, and then we add them together is more or less 9,000.
Okay, so you're pointing at this in terms of pool of votes, her base enhanced probably, right, through new votes from the professionals and all, and also the vote from the new Chinese Youth Association plus some or a number of voters who used to cast their ballot for Po Put, who was not running this time.
Right. These are the so-called middle class kind of voters with education, educated, middle class, and they prefer stability, they prefer status quo, but at the same time...
They are moderately liberal somehow.
Yes.
And now, if we take into account this, we have these two new faces, Suluso and Agnes Lam, and another new face who is the Leung Sun Yok from LLA's list. But let's now talk about Suluso and Agnes Lam. What sort of novelty would they bring to the Legislative Assembly? Now we're talking about Agnes Lam. Let's continue. Professor Eilo, can we expect new issues on the table, a different approach?
You can observe that when Agnes, having her campaign, and she got a lot of support from her team. Most of them are professional. So in this regard, I believe that in the future, if her team can continue the support to her, and I believe that she can, get a more professional debate in the legislature by getting more information, data, and evidence from the professional groups that to question and to debate in the legislature, and then this will push the government to be more scientifically react and responsible, to her questions. And so I believe that she can have this approach, in the legislature. But we still get to see whether her team will continue supporting her after the election.
Yes, I agree with that. But then on top of that, I will see that she would go for more, the urban renewal,
environment, urban renewal.
Yeah, and gender. I think this is one of the
women's rights.
Women's rights, in terms of the gender. I think she could do a lot better than Wong. That is
Wong Ki-cheng from the Women's Association.
Exactly. I mean, she's more in the field rather than just saying women's right. I mean, we are talking about gender. Gender is not only women's right or women's priority, that kind of stuff. But we are talking about, the equality of sex. These are more in the academic terms. But the gender, it can put us more in the related with international arena.
Now, about Suluso, what can we expect from Suluso as a lawmaker? We've seen from the reactions from, we can assume, people in the pro-Beijing camp, is that there's a sort of concern of some sort of Hong Kongization being, because that's at least what's, I would say, mirrored in some criticism thrown at Suluso. What do you think? Do you think there would be something, at least to some extent, in this direction? Or not necessarily. And the question also applies to those who...
they can do it in the legislature, but maybe outside the legislature, The president of legislature, is very powerful, no filibuster. You cannot just run to the desk of the chairman.
You can't throw things.
Yeah, right. You cannot do it. Well, of course, you still can have poster. I think.
So far, yes.
Yes, they withdrew that.
I don't think he has chance to leave his chair.
What about the style? He's from a different generation compared with Antonio Nguo-chong, Ao Kam-san. Style and substance. What can we expect from Suluso?
Well, I think he will continue what he did outside the institution rather than just relying on the institution. But of course, once he entered, people pay more attention on what he's doing, and that may help to arouse the public. But at the same time, I think this is a concern about the leadership successions in the pro-democracy camp. I don't know. I have a feeling that it is a repeat of what happened 20 years ago when Alexandra Ho and Antonio they have different approach, and then finally, I would say, the people using their vote, to decide, the future of the pro-democracy camp. But this time I don't know, but it seems, we have.
It seems very
interesting point, Larry. So when you're looking at succession, let's say, if we split and put in one basket a more activist and assertive wing, which is led by, and have a younger generation led by Suluso, and another one which is more mainstream, moderate, embodied by Nguo-chong and Ao Kam-san, especially Nguo-chong. Who's next? I mean, who are the successors of Antonio Ng and Ao Kam-san? From Suluso's generation, we could see some of them in the ticket, but is anyone rising to the limelight somehow?
so far we haven't seen any, any particular person that rise, to the extent that we say that we can label him as the future leader. Yes, that's true. But then,
as a kind of more mainstream pro-democracy politician.
Well, it seems in the pro-democratic camp that the so-called succession is not determined by the new society, the new Macau society, but by the voters.
This is democracy.
well, you can say, yeah, it is a democracy.
Yes.
But then sometimes, we do have problem with that because we don't know who is the next person, and then we haven't got that kind of training for him. Right. And unlike Mr. So, he is fortunate enough. He got all these different kind of training or opportunities and experience in Taiwan, and then in Macau with the compensation issue. We don't have that kind of issue every day. So if they go through this kind of issue, he was kind of baptized in the politics. So he got the experience. But what now? What next? But in fact, we do see that not only in this camp, for the pro-Beijing camp, I think we still have the same problem. We do not find that strong second-tier leaders coming up.
But now we have a new generation. Let's say Lei Ching-yi.
Federation. But then if you look at the Kaifang, the women's, the federation.
Women's we have Wong Ki-cheng, but
no, well,
she's 35, right?
Yeah, okay. He can have another 2 terms. But then how about the Kaifang?
Hao Yuan-sang.
Yeah.
He was the successor of Leung Heng-teng, but what about who's next, right?
Who's next? I mean, the whole camp, and in general, we do find that they don't have that kind of strong leadership coming out. Or unless, as usual, appointed, well, there's another issue. Appointed from top. So we don't really care about who will be the next one.
We miss Ron Lam.
Yes. Well, very well noted, Professor Eilo Yu. We have to talk about the power of synergy. This list, they managed to secure over 7,000 votes for the first time. Ron Lam Yuto, former assistant to lawmaker Kwan Choi Hang. And also in that ticket, we also had former Macau Daily News Munyatpo journalist.
Yes. Right.
How come they managed to get this share of votes? Are they a force to be reckoned with in the future?
Well, I think this is just like what the Democrats are doing, and then we have some young talents in the establishment forces. But he could not get support in the camp, and then he came out and he gets support from the people. And now it seems to me that yes, the people support, at least a certain number of people support him. But how about next election? Well, that is the point. I believe that this is what the Macau people decide. They are quite boring about what happening in the conservative camp, and actually
they want new faces also in a new style, right?
They are not that attractive at this moment, and they want new faces. And if you don't like the progressive forces, yes, you have alternative.
But it's interesting. But if you compare, let's say, for instance, Ron Lam's result with Ko Ngan-fong 4 years ago, or even the New Chinese Youth Association's ticket back in 2005, it's way more than what they secured. And back then they were also newcomers. Right. So this is a newcomer that basically is about 1,000 or a bit more than 1,000 votes short of getting a seat.
Right.
So.
I mean, this is a new. Well, if we look at the new ecology in the future, is that now they could be the new faces in the coming terms.
But do you expect
this 4 year, unless he continue to serve the community, to speak out for the people, or well, if I were the pro-Beijing camp, I will kind of buy him back.
Right.
But does this signal a sort of fragmentation as well within the patriotic or pro-Beijing camp? What we witnessed with, let's say, Lam Yuto and other some results?
Well, I think this is, that is just like Agnes Lam and Ron Lam,
That's right. That's why
they
originally they came from
their support
these camps,
actually break through the dichotomy between the pro-establishment as well as the, pro-democracy. Now you have more choices. That is to spread, they actually break through this dichotomy, but I don't know whether, they sooner or later, merge to other side, I don't know. But yeah, at least at this moment, people find that, yes.
It's a more diverse spectrum now.
Yes, we got to spread, around the spectrum, not only have two camps.
Now, before we wrap up our talk, we have to talk about what some of our viewers may consider the elephant in the room, Chan Men-kam, with all due respect, of course, because his strategy was a failure in the sense that, well, he stepped down, he put forth 2 tickets, probably aiming at increasing from 3 to 4 lawmakers, or worst case scenario, he might have thought, securing 3 seats, and at the end of the day, he lost a seat. A powerful and influential figure, and a powerful and influential group deeply rooted in the communities, especially originally from Fujian. Why?
Well, I think that, actually, I was not surprised. For the groups, they missed one, they lost 1 seat. But actually, when Mr. Chan, declared that he will not run again, and that's mean, I probably believe that, they may only get 2 seats. But of course, if luckily they can get 3, it's quite obvious. Mr. Chan actually he's quite charismatic. Of course, but if he run, people will support. If he not, it is not possible to transfer all his support to to his successor. But you see now, actually, Sigalan and Song Baek-K, right? That they get 24,000, right? More or less the same, but of course dropped a few thousands. But I think that the result is good. It's not that bad.
Well, the result is acceptable, but then it is a strategy problem. Now, he's trying to use the strategy of splitting the team so that he can have more votes, in terms of if he can match all these, points, matching all these people. Now, he can have from 2 get up to 4. But then at the same time, look at the whole election field. It seems that everybody is using the same tactics, splitting teams. Right. So in that case, all the votes in the community is evenly distributed.
1 + 1 does not necessarily translate into 3 or 4.
Exactly.
What about Chan Men-kam's future, politically speaking? He won't be at the Legislative Assembly anymore. He remains a member of the very powerful Executive Council.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Some people are speculating, perhaps something else may come.
Any new position in the government?
Well, he's saying that he won't go for any appointed members.
Of course not, right?
That's right.
Definitely. So.
What about Choi Soon-young's potential choices for appointed members? The 7 lawmakers to be appointed by the chief executive. Any guesses? Not necessarily names, but profiles, or more of the same, something slightly different?
Well, you can't be that much difference, because the function of appointed member is to balance the power within the chamber. Within the Legislative Assembly. So in that case, if you got somebody, that a little bit outspoken, so you have got somebody in a similar field, or that quite related with that field, and then you can kind of balance him or her off. Now, so in that case, now we can see that right now we do not have that many academics in the assembly. So I think the CEO should appoint somebody along that line, the legal profession and the academic.
Perhaps a political scientist such as Professor Eilo Yu?
Probably
not.
Your final words.
No, yes, I agree with Larry that yes, we need more professional, and I believe that the government need more professional in the legislature. At the same time, just they got to debate with against the opposition. That is, at the same time, they got to provide more professional evidence, to prove the government policy is correct. Okay. We cannot still keeping the old practice. That is, you are wrong. Okay, I'm correct. So this is not the way that we hope to see in the legislature.
Well, there would be much more to talk about, but we have to end here. Professor Eilo Yu, Professor Larry, so thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
it was
you.
such an interesting talk, fascinating stuff. Pleasure to have you on the show again.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And to you at home, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week.